Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome, friend, to our 2-year anniversary episode for the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. This month, we have been celebrating all month long with some summer throwback episodes. And this episode is going to be Holly and I chatting and answering some questions and just kind of reflecting on the fact that we have made it to 2 years of doing the podcast together. So we're going to talk about some of the lessons we've learned, some of our experiences, and some of our fan questions, which feels sort of weird to say, but I'm
It
excited,
does feel
Holly.
weird, right? So our questions come from our listeners in our Purposeful Leadership private Facebook group. And so if you've been listening to the podcast for the past 2 years, or you just found us and you're not in the Facebook group, today we're giving you a personal invitation to join us there. So we love our listeners and enjoy getting to know you guys better in that group. And so it's a community where you can get support and encouragement from other Christian leaders. We chat about the episode topics. Esther and I will occasionally go live,
Yes.
which is always fun. We never know what's going to happen. And we just love to have fun together in that group. So we would love for you to join us. The link to the group will be available in the show notes. And this is your personal invitation. So never say that you were not invited, because you were.
Exactly. Yes. And we have had people join. Like, I think this past month, I've had people join, and I always ask you questions when you join. So make sure you answer the questions, because that helps us keep out weirdo spammer people, helps us just keep the group healthy and strong and full of amazing Christian leaders. But sometimes people tell me that they have been listening to the podcast for like a year or a year and a half, and they're just joining now. So if that's you, if you've been listening to the podcast and you're like, you hear us talk about the Facebook group, but you haven't taken that step to jump in, then please take our invitation, take it to heart, go to the show notes, click the link, and join. Okay?
You need to do it because we're super fun.
Yes, it is. And I will tell you, we've talked about this before, but like sometimes, social media can be really a downer. It can be really frustrating. And even right now, just like very hateful and full of distress. But what I love is when I go into the Purposeful Leadership group, I know it's going to be full of encouragement and wisdom and fun. And not that we don't talk about hard things, but we really do our best to keep out any unnecessary fighting or negativity. So it's a safe place.
A junk-free zone.
That's right. Yes. All right. So one more thing we want to mention before we dive into our questions is that we want to ask you if you know that we have a bonus podcast. Yes, it's true. So we have had some amazing guests that have come on, and we have been asking them some bonus questions outside of the regular interview, because we want to reward any of you who have chosen to support our podcast. So we've got amazing content from some of our past guests like Madge Obaseki, Dr. Barbara Lowe, Dr. Stephanie Holmes, amazing Alisa Childers, and lots of other guests that have talked about how they define leadership, some of their habits and routines, some of their favorite tools and resources, and just words of encouragement for you. So tell us how they can get access to that, Holly.
Yeah, so to get access to the bonus episodes and all the future content that we are going to put in the bonus podcast, just go to estherlittlefield.com/support and become a member. for only $5 a month, you get first dibs on all the bonus content we have there. And you can help support future episodes on the podcast going forward. So we would love for you to jump on, get all of that bonus stuff. Seriously, there is some really great. I don't want to make you jealous or upset, but you're missing out on some really good stuff in there. So go join, become a member, and help us support and get all of that stuff that everyone else might be missing out on.
Yeah. And I will mention too, because you might be saying, well, I already listened to this podcast and it's so amazing and so full of just amazing content. How can I add another, more of this, right?
It's true.
Well, the thing about these episodes is that they're like 5 minutes or less. They're just mini-sodes kind of.
Mini-sodes, I like that. I was going to say they're bite-sized nuggets.
Yes, right.
Of chewable, digestible content.
Pure value. We don't really have a lot of, not that our episodes are full of fluff, but this is just we ask a question and they give us the answer. Yeah. And then we ask another question and we give it, it's very kind of lightning round-ish.
Right.
So come on over, check it out. You can find the link to become a supporter of the podcast right in the show notes. And if you're listening on your phone, if you click that link, it will take you right to the step to just start the payment for $5 a month. And then it will give you immediate access to add that bonus podcast right onto your phone. So it'll be whatever podcast player you listen in, it will automatically pull the podcast feed in just for you. So pretty cool.
You are like an insider.
That's right.
Insider secrets.
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready to get started with
I am.
Questions? Okay. So as we said, these came from our Facebook group, and our listeners have asked us questions about our 2 years, just some different things about us. And so we are going to answer their questions. So if you were part of the podcast Facebook group, you would have been able to get in on this. But
that's right.
You will be able to get in on future episodes if you join now. So, all right. So Kathy Pierre Dunphy, who is actually your mom.
That's right.
I don't know if you like it that I point that out, but I do it anyway because Kathy is just the best. Kathy and I used to work together and we had fun. She was great. Anyway, she asked, what has been the best thing that has happened for you during this 2-year journey?
All right. So I think this is really a hard question to answer because I feel like there have been so many good things that have happened during the podcast journey. But I think probably the most impactful for me is hearing from the listeners that they feel God has spoken to them through the podcast. And that's just kind of very humbling and also amazing to get to be a part of that. I can think of a few times when I have been listening to a podcast where I have just had that sense and that feeling that God used that moment to speak to me. And so I know what that's like. And I love that he's allowed us to be a part of that for other people too. So that's probably the best thing that's happened for me.
Yeah. So for me, I think just from, personal aspect, I think that this podcast has made us grow closer. Don't you think?
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. So getting closer to Esther is definitely something super positive that has come out of this whole journey. But the ways the podcast has helped other women gain confidence to lead really is so impactful because I know what it's like to have those sort of really pivotal moments in your leadership that just kind of change the game for you. And so if we've been able to do that just a little bit for people, it's so amazing and encouraging. And that's the whole reason that, we wanted to start doing this anyway. So, and I think the other part is just watching God sort of shape this whole thing. And I really think that both of us, while we work towards bettering the podcast and doing the best that we can and producing something of excellence, both of us have kind of our hand open to God and just saying, this is for you and use it however you want to. And as I've said before, we are allowing him to bring the increase or bring the decrease. So whichever way he wants this to go, we're on board for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. So our next question comes from Carrie Barkus, and she wants to know, what are your family traditions or routines, either growing up or now? This is a fun question.
I don't know. I have such a hard time with this one. I guess when I think of the question, all I think of is holidays and stuff. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Well, I think, no, I have other things I can talk
Okay,
about.
then you answer so I know. Because that's all I'm going to.
Okay, well, for example, one of my favorite things that my family did growing up was going berry picking in the summertime.
Oh,
So we would always like go strawberry picking when it was strawberry season, and then blueberry picking when it was blueberry season. And so that's something I've carried into my family.
Mm.
And sometimes I sort of have to drag other people along with me. To do this because it's just so nostalgic for me. Like, I just love it. It's just, there's something about just standing in the blueberry fields. And anyway, if you're from Maine, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you may not get it as much, but either way, like this morning, I went strawberry picking because it's nearing the end of the season and I cannot stand the idea that I would go a summer without being able to get fresh strawberries. So that's one for me. And then I'm going to answer the other part of the question, which is the routines part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that kind of makes me laugh. I really like routines. I like to have structure, but I will admit that our family is not the best at being consistent with this. And like back when this whole COVID thing happened, I remember you posted a whole thing in the Facebook group for us about what you had put into place for your family. Because it was like, we have got to get some kind of routine going here, right? And that was so encouraging to see and like such a good idea. But I'll admit the family routines for us, especially during the summer and then during the spring when we didn't have normal school and all that, kind of were just almost non-existent. And so we kind of have been slacking. So I'm really looking forward to if and when we go back to school in the fall to get back into that, like getting up at a certain time and getting everything ready and getting people out the door. And then I can start my routine of the things that I need to do during the day. But that's my very weirdly answered question for that one.
No,
Basically, I need to get better at routines. I like them. And there are certain things I do consistently, but a lot of stuff I don't do as well as I would like. So,
okay. So I think I know what our family tradition is. So every single summer, and Zach and I did this when we were dating, pretty much from the moment I started hanging out with him. I think even before we're dating, we did this. We go to Bar Harbor, which is it's like an hour and a half from the Bangor area in Maine. It's right on the coast, Mount Desert Island, Acadia National Park. It's beautiful. Yeah. So that is definitely a tradition. I mean, there are certain things we always do when we're there. We always go up Cadillac Mountain. There's like a trail up there that we hike. It's like a walkway. I'm going to call it hiking because that sounds better, but it's literally just a sidewalk.
It's very beautiful.
It is beautiful. We always go to a place called Ben and Bill's and we get these little mints. A lot of people go there for their ice cream, which is also good, but Zach really likes these little mints that they have. We always walk around town. And okay, this is the saddest part. There is a tradition that we cannot do anymore. Okay,
oh no.
Are you ready?
What is it?
So they have a shop in Bar Harbor called the Christmas Spirit.
Yes.
And every summer we would buy our Christmas ornaments every summer so that when Christmas came along, we would have this really special moment where we would open that year's ornament. It would have the year and it would have like a little snowman or something. And it would just remind us of going to Bar Harbor. And it was just so anyway, long story short, that store closed this year.
Because of the
I think
pandemic.
Maybe because of, I think the owners maybe were a bit older.
Okay.
But anyway, there were all these handcrafted ornaments and we would get one every single year. Eli literally has an ornament for every year of his life.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So anyway, it's going to be so sad this year.
That is sad. You're going to have to go to a different shop. Maybe there's a different shop that sells Christmas ornaments.
Maybe. I don't know of any.
Not in Bar Harbor specifically.
No, not in Bar Harbor. They are they are personalized too. Like they say the year, cool. They say our names, all that jazz.
This is not just any ornament.
No. This is not. Okay. This is personalized, and we all pick it out together.
Yeah,
like it's a thing. So
got it.
I did relate it back to Christmas, regardless of whether I meant to or not.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too before. Like we have a lot of traditions around the holidays too that I like to stick with. So
okay, ready for our next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Kylie Torstad says, do you have any regrets from this journey or otherwise ways you would have done things differently had you had the opportunity to do it over again?
Mm. So I was thinking about this and I feel like I don't really have regrets from this. It's been one of those things where God has led us each step of the way, and there might have been some things we did wrong or not the best, but I feel like we've learned from all of those things. I think the only thing that we haven't really done that we had hoped to do was have some sort of sponsorship going on for the podcast. And I don't know if it's a regret that we haven't done it. I think it's been something that takes a lot of time and energy to find that and to get that arranged. And there's been other things that we've done that have just been more pressing and more important.
Yeah.
So again, I don't really think it's a regret, but maybe if I had the opportunity to do it again, I might prioritize that more.
Yeah.
In some ways to bring in some funding for the podcast.
Yeah. Income.
So,
our balance sheet, our income statement are quite lopsided.
Just a little bit.
That's okay. Bit. Okay. Anyway. So I think I agree with you. I don't have any regrets really. I mean, there's always things you can do better, but like you said, it's a learning process. And I think for me, like working with Esther, there is legit always a well thought out plan and everything is well researched. So I have like 100% trust in her processes and her guidances and her guidance, whatever, her knowledge.
That's okay.
All that stuff. So I completely trust her with all of that. And she's done like such a phenomenal job. So much so that she's been able to help other podcasters launch their podcasts and organize them better and give them a process. Like she's the queen of this. But anyway, I guess from my perspective, I wish I could have been able to support you a little bit more. Like you truly are like the powerhouse behind this thing. And you just make sure that everything gets done. You're so detailed. Like I am a little bit more like loosey-goosey, go with the flow. I mean, I obviously with what I'm doing for a living, I have to be detailed, but I'm not detailed in every single part of my life. Right. Yeah. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is I'm really grateful for Esther and all of her skills and talents when it comes to this, because she's the main source of energy when it comes to pushing this along. So.
Well, thank you. But I was thinking about it, and I don't know if this is one of the questions. I'm just going to jump ahead for a second because I feel like actually this is going to lead into the next question.
Oh, perfect.
What unexpected lessons have you learned, good or bad, from starting a podcast? And what has kept you going for 2 years without getting burned out? That question is from Teresa Huff. So one of the things I was thinking about with this question is that even though I do more of the technical work or whatever, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to keep going for 2 years if it hadn't been for you being part of this podcast, because I'm doing a second podcast now. If you guys don't know, I'm doing the Christian Woman Business Podcast, and it's very different when you're doing it solo than when you're doing it with someone else.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like the fact that we have had this to do together and that we've had, I know I can bounce ideas off of you. We brainstorm, we plan, we just do a lot of the content preparation together that otherwise I feel like I may not have been able to be as consistent as we have been. So that's one thing.
Oh, thank you.
So a lesson that I have learned that I feel like has been both from doing this podcast and also from working with other podcasters is to vet your guests really well. Like to really get to know who you're going to be interviewing. And the more we've done this, I feel like the better we've gotten at it. But it truly makes a difference when you are familiar with the guest enough to ask good questions and to really dig a little bit deeper. Because if you have listened to the podcast, we don't like to just stay on surface topics. Like we want to go deeper and really dig into things that maybe you don't normally hear someone talk about on a podcast or on an interview. So the times when I haven't really known the guest very well, or I didn't get enough information ahead of time, I feel like those podcast interviews were harder because I didn't have as much information that would have helped the interview flow better. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the other thing that has helped us to not get burned out is really a few systems and tools, which Holly said, like I have a whole process for the podcast. We've talked about it before, the Trello board, the checklist, all of those things. I mean, that is a lifesaver. And then we have gotten to the point where we are able to batch our recordings. So typically we only record basically 2 days a month. And then in the summer, we mostly take the summer off, at least most of July and August. We don't record. We are recording today and it's July, but that's okay. But we've gotten ahead enough. We've recorded several interviews in a row kind of thing so that we get ahead. And that really helps with not feeling like, oh my word, we have an episode that needs to get out next week and we're scrambling to figure out who we're going to talk to or what we're going to talk about. It's really a lot of planning ahead of time and batching that has helped us to stay consistent.
Yeah.
All right. What about you?
So I have two. One's more personal. So the first one is I'm less afraid of offending people than I used to be. And let me explain that because that sounds bad. But I've always been the kind of person who kind of doesn't care what other people think to a certain extent. I am insecure about some things. I'm self-conscious, that sort of thing. But for the most part, like I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm probably not going to shy away from things just because people don't like it. Like that's just me.
Yeah.
But as we've gone on with the podcast and gone further with it, and we've delved into some really sensitive topics, we've broached things, I have been a lot more willing to say things that perhaps in the past I may not have, and with like a little bit less caring about what people think. And it's not so much like I'm going to say whatever I want and I don't care what you think. We really try to have really balanced, fair conversations about things. We try to see all sides of topics, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the idea of if you're in business of like niching down, like we are finding our perfect people and our perfect listeners by sort of digging deeper into those topics and really having honest conversations about them. So I would say that maybe lessons learned are just, I don't want to not do something because I'm afraid of repercussions, I guess. Yeah. And I've gotten stronger in that. And does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
Okay, good. Okay. And then the other part of this is you have some really great people on your team that support us. Like you have an editor, you have people who help with show notes and social media and all of those things. And so I think that having people who are working in their gifts and talents and lend that to support us and not lend it for free. You pay for it, but you know what I mean? They're really working within their skills to make us even better. And it's one of those things that when you can rely on those other people as part of the team to really have your back and have the podcast back and have excellence kind of in mind. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
And I fully agree with that. And I didn't say that before. So I'm glad you brought up the idea that part of not getting burned out is making sure that you're not the only one doing everything. And then the other piece that I feel like for me has been a piece of that is really taking time to appreciate the feedback that we get. And I feel like that keeps us going. Like when we see those emails or those comments or those conversations in the Facebook group where people are talking about how the podcast is impacting them, that lets us know like this is making a difference. So that helps keep us moving forward in addition to knowing that it's something that God has given us to do. So, Awesome.
Okay. Ready for our next question?
Yeah.
So this is from Cindy Ownby. She said, which guests moved you, surprised you, made you laugh, changed your thoughts on a topic, or challenged you? Or maybe it's moments or stories that not so much the specific guests, but any standout memories. So tell me what you think.
Okay. Well, this is one of those questions, once again, that is really hard to answer.
Yeah.
Because one, I was going to say, I think that we laugh on every episode. I'm pretty sure we do.
Yeah, we do.
Even with guests where the topic is heavier, I feel like we've still laughed at some point. So that's been fun.
Yeah.
And we've had a few of our guests after we've gotten done recording and we turn off the recording, they'll be like, that was really fun. Like they enjoy it too. So that's so encouraging to hear that they enjoyed it. Cause I've been on interviews where I'm like, this isn't good. So yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pick 3 guests that I enjoyed, but again, I've loved every episode we've done, but specifically to answer Cindy's question, I feel like the episode we did recently where I talked with Dr. Shannon Polk, we talked about racism.
That was such a good episode.
It was just, I was very impacted by it and by her willingness to talk to me. First of all, her willingness to have that conversation. And then just to kind of the way she responded to questions and the way she navigated the conversation, I just felt was so grace-filled and truth-filled.
Yes.
And helpful. And I heard from many of you who listened to that episode that it impacted you. And so that was one that I feel like definitely helped me change some of my thoughts about some things or help me think about it in a different way that I hadn't. So that's one. I also really enjoyed talking with Hillary Morgan Ferrer in episode 59. We talked about apologetics, and I really enjoyed how she talked about the role of apologetics within the Christian world and how that was like apologetics isn't just for kind of trying to convince someone to be a Christian. It's really about helping people who are already Christians stay in the faith. And that was a powerful part of the conversation. And then we also talked about doubt and how doubt is a normal part of our lives. And so that was a really interesting conversation as well. And I'm really into apologetics personally. So I feel like I was kind of biased with that, but I still feel like it's a powerful conversation for any Christian who cares about faith to listen to. So then lastly, I enjoyed my conversation with Valerie Warner. In episode 90, we talked about her business journey. And I just felt like her perspective was so refreshing in the Christian space and how she has built her business. She just gave a lot of examples of ways that she has chosen to do business differently in light of her faith and in light of her values. And it was very encouraging and powerful in terms of just kind of rethinking some of my own perspective around building a business that, you really don't have to do all the things that maybe you feel the pressure to do. And she still has a very thriving, successful business. So those were my 3. So what about you, Holly? What are your favorites or moments that impacted you?
Okay. So as we've mentioned, this was really hard because we have truly had some amazing conversations with people. And I feel like every single conversation I walk away with something that has impressed me or has like the Holy Spirit has used. So
yeah, exactly.
But the ones that off the top of my head, I super loved the episode with Sharon Hottie Miller, which was episode 80 about her book, Nice. And that conversation just really reminded me to be bold and confident and to challenge the idea of traditional niceties that we really feel like are crippling the church. That one was kind of,
yeah.
If you can picture me like sitting back on my couch and someone asked me like, tell me about your childhood. Like that one just kind of blew up some of the stuff from my childhood that was just such a part of church and growing up and the Christian culture at the time. And so anyway, I love that one. The second one was the one with Katie Cole, episode 60. We talk about her book, Developing Female Leaders. And I think the thing that really hit me with that one is it just gave me the words to talk about things that I've witnessed in the church, things I've experienced in the church. And for some reason, when you go through some of these things in your mind that it's not right or what's happening isn't God's best. And sometimes it's really hard to put words to that. So I was so appreciative of that conversation. And I think the thing that stands out for me the most is that that book could have really been written with lots of bitterness and anger for the wrongs committed to Katie, to the women that she's talked to with the church, the wrongs that the church has done. And it wasn't. She wrote and spoke to us in that episode with such an open hand and with such kindness and respect for everyone on all sides of the topic, and just really confidently kind of put her finger on the things that need to be worked on, and did it with kindness and as well as a calling for the church to do better, which I so appreciated. I just really respect her and admire her for coming at that topic in that way. And then lastly, of course, Esther and I super geeked out on the episode with Elisa Childers. I feel like we could be still sitting here talking to her today
Yes.
if we didn't have a time frame on it, because we both just really love her podcast. I think the more that I'm coming to do this podcast, the more that I'm really enjoying apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked to her about so many different things, and we could have bent her ear for a long time about a lot of stuff.
Well, and you were a little bit giddy because she was a member of Zoe Girl, which was a band that was popular back in the day when we were growing up, or late, I guess it was like our late high school years, right? Or early college years.
Yeah. So she was a little bit more focused on like the tweeny age.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And we were a little bit older, but still like, I mean, there's some classics out there, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if you were steeped in Christian teen culture at the time, you know who Zoe Girl is.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a moment.
Fangirling. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and I guess I should throw this in here too, because I had the opportunity. It was a very last minute thing that happened where I was able to interview Emily P. Freeman.
Oh, yeah.
And that was probably the most like nervous I was to interview someone, because she's someone that I have followed and looked up to for several years. And so I was definitely a little bit like, I had that same feeling of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm talking to Emily. But yet she's so down to earth and so very, very relatable that it wasn't anything awkward at all. So. All right. So one thing we wanted to do in this episode, so those were the questions we got from the Facebook group. We have a couple other questions we're going to hit on before we wrap things up. But in our 1 year anniversary episode, one thing we did was we shared our top 5 most listened to episodes at that point in our journey. And so I thought it would be fun to just kind of share our list again, but see how it's changed in year 2. And see what episodes make the top 5. And so this is based on the data from our podcast hosts, where we can see, how many downloads each episode has gotten. And we can sort it based on the most popular. So number 1, should we start with number 5 or number 1?
Oh, no, I want to start with number 5.
Oh, okay.
Do like a countdown.
Okay, let's count down.
I'm so glad you didn't say it.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so 5. So episode number, the 5th most popular episode was episode number 83, When God Shifts Your Path into the Unknown with Tembi Seacrest. And that was a part 1 of a 2-part episode. That's the only episode where we've had to split it into 2 parts because it was so long. But it was just so powerful, her story of going around the world. And so go listen to that one if you haven't heard that one.
Okay, so number 4 is episode 63, and that one is called The Power of Community Through Devastating Seasons. And that was with Brandy Wilson. That was part of our friendship series. That one was a very good one. And I think that, just go listen to it if you haven't listened to it, because it just speaks so much to how your community can really get you through. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what the title says.
Yeah. Through devastating
it can really get you through devastating seasons.
And it was episode 64. You said 63, but it's 64.
I did. I'm sorry. It was 64.
Yeah. That's all right. And we're going to link these up in the show notes too, so you can just
listen to me, but I was wrong. Okay, number 3 was number 3.
Okay, so the third one is episode 80, which has been mentioned, How to Avoid the Trap of Niceness and Speak Boldly with Sharon Hottie Miller. Mm-hmm. So again, that one was very popular. I think a lot of people want to have help with how to stop just feeling like they have to be nice about everything. Mm-hmm. And again, to get the context of that, you'll want to listen to the episode. So
yeah. Yep. Okay, so number 2 was episode 81, and that was dealing with burnout, compassion fatigue, and mental health as a Christian leader with Laura Howe. And I really loved the different, she just kind of really fleshed out those those different things, the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout, and maybe on top of that, or more in depth, what's truly a mental health issue.
Right.
And I think that is a very important episode to listen to as a leader.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
81, go listen to that one.
Yes, for sure. Okay. So number 1, drum roll, imaginary drum roll.
Yep.
Actually, episode number 1, which is our leadership journeys and what to expect from the podcast. So, I'm sure we said this on the 1 year anniversary episode, but really that's the episode that probably a lot of people go and just like click on to find out, is this even a podcast that they want to listen to? Because what's this all about? Tell me about this idea. So we can't get our heads too big about that one because even though that's the two of us together.
I assume that number 1, so I have gone back and listened to number 1, but it's been maybe 6 months since I've done that.
Okay.
And I will say it wasn't the worst, but it could have been rougher, but we've definitely grown since then. So I'm glad that people are going back and listening to that.
Yeah.
I think it just, I don't know, talks a little bit more about us and what we've been through and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
good. It gives context for
Yeah.
how this podcast came about. So I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So that was our top 5 list. So we have a couple more questions, Holly, that we want to answer here, right?
Well, I have a question first.
Oh, okay.
Do you know how many total downloads we've had thus far?
Yes. So we are very close to 190,000 downloads.
That's amazing.
Right now. Yeah, we're pretty close to that. So I'm probably in the month of July, we would exceed that. So we may,
good.
I don't know if we'll get to 200,000. That would be a stretch for this month, for July, but maybe by the end of August.
Oh, so watch the Facebook group for our little celebration post when we hit 200,000 downloads.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
It is cool. Yep.
It's also like a little bit daunting. I know that those are not unique people.
Right.
But the fact that our episodes have been downloaded that many times.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like overwhelming.
I guess it just means that there's people that enjoy this podcast. So we're happy about that.
Okay. Let's move on to the reflection questions.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I like this question. I think I want to cover this one. So what is a topic that we haven't covered to date on the podcast that you would like to cover in the coming year?
Oh my goodness. I wrote this question and I don't have an answer for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I have one that I'll mention. I think that we have done a pretty good job of covering some of the major issues that are facing the church and church leadership for women in particular. But one that we really haven't touched on is the issue of sexual abuse in the church.
Yes.
And I do think that would be one that we should probably cover. And we should probably have a guest that could speak to that.
Yeah.
So it's something that has impacted a lot of women. And sadly, very sadly, but I do think it's something we should cover at some point.
Yeah. I think probably because you just wrote a post on it, but I think that we should talk about the cancel culture that's happening right now and sort of what that means for the church and what that means for Christians as they walk through their faith, if they are sort of taking in that cancel culture and starting to speak that back out to people. What does that actually do to your witness, to your testimony, and how does the cancel culture align or misalign with truth? I think it's so pervasive to say, if you believe this, then we can't be friends. You're out. You're done. You're canceled.
You're not in the club.
And that's just, we won't go into it now, but
I'll link to the post that I wrote about this topic.
You did write a good post.
Which it wasn't in depth about cancel culture, but I included that reference there. So it's definitely an issue that's happening. So we could tackle that.
I think that's a good one. Okay. So I'm going to ask you this question. What has been something that has stuck with you that a listener has said to you?
Okay. So again, it's hard to pick just one thing in this, but when I get messages, sometimes I'll get messages on Instagram or on Facebook, or I'll just see posts in the Facebook group and I'll try to screenshot them, because that is very encouraging when you're having a day where you're like, oh, everything is horrible and I want to give up. Like, being able to go back and read those messages is really encouraging. And there's one that I got from somebody, and it was last year. It's been within the past year. They messaged me and said, "Thank you for your weekly podcast. It inspired me to lead my first small group through our church. We currently have 8 ladies in various stages of life who meet once a week and discuss topics from your latest podcast." And she just basically said, like, without the podcast, she may not have actually been able to start that. And she was using the podcast as the content for the small group, which I was just like, that blew me away. When I got that message, it blew me away, because I just couldn't, that was something I never would have imagined could have come out of the podcast. So that was really encouraging. I mean, there's been so many other messages that we've gotten that have been encouraging. And I think probably, again, this isn't like a specific one, but whenever there's somebody that says, I listened to X episode and it prompted me to do this thing. Yeah. And whatever that thing is, like, it prompted them to take their next step with their faith or their leadership. That is always powerful. What about you?
I love that.
Do you have one?
Yeah. So this one is interesting, and I hope I can explain it well, but I was meeting with someone for my business. I was chatting with someone that was like a mutual friend business wise. And she was talking about some business struggles she had. And I was kind of talking about some that I had. We were talking about things we wanted to do in the future. And we were just kind of chatting through that stuff. And I don't even remember the comment I made. And I had kind of totally forgotten that she was a listener to the podcast. But I basically said something to the effect of like, well, people don't really know who I am, so I can't expect this specific thing out of this thing I want to do. And she said to me, I think you have a bigger platform than you give yourself credit for. And I was like, what? And she was like, people know who you are through the podcast, and they really have gotten to know you. And not that it wasn't in my mind, not that I don't know that we've been doing this podcast for 2 years, but I never thought about it that way. And it just kind of struck me out of left field that I have maybe a bigger platform than I think I do. And, because when you're in your closet or you're in your mother's in-law's spare bedroom next to the craft table.
Yes. Yep.
And you're talking into what feels to some extent to be an empty room, you forget these things. And I hope that it helps me be vulnerable and open and really say caring things to people, because I'm not worrying about all of like the stage and all of that stuff. I hope it really lends to vulnerability, as I said before. But it's one of those things that I was just like, wow, God really has given us a big platform, and sometimes it feels small, but it's really huge. And I want to speak to 200,000 downloads the same way that I would speak to one download. And I want that to be evident and clear. And so I don't know, that just really stuck with me. And I was like, it's still so strange to meet people out in the open wild that say that they listen to the podcast. I don't know. I mean, she was like, I've listened to almost every episode. And I was like, oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah.
I
like that. I think that's so good. And I think that maybe just to reflect on one of the lessons that I've learned, and I talked about this on episode 10 of the Christian Woman Business Podcast. So if you haven't listened to that, go check that out. It was last week's episode, but it'll be older when this goes live. So either way, I talked about the power of relationships and like why relationships are the best way to grow your business. So one thing that I have learned from doing this, when we first started, even before I started the podcast and before when I was just blogging, I would get emails from people, right? Like email replies to emails that I had sent out or, comments on my blog. And I think there was a time when I felt like, oh, I'm only getting 2 email replies, or I'm only getting 2 comments on my blog. Like that's not that big of a deal. Like why am I doing this? And God has really shifted my perspective, like to what you said now, is that every single person that takes the time to comment or takes the time to reply is a person. That's a person that matters. And I may not be able to reply to every single person, but I try. I try to reply and get back to people when I can, because I know that their need or their comment or their perspective is just as important as if there was 50 of them. It doesn't matter. It's still one person. And so that lesson of, I guess if you're listening and you are someone who is trying to build something online or trying to make an impact in your community or in your church, and you're like, there's only 10 people showing up, or there's only 5 people coming to my small group, pour into those 5 people like you would if there were 50. Treat that smaller group to the same level of care and concern that you want to when you reach a bigger number. Because if you don't do that, you may never grow into that place where you do have a bigger platform or you do have a bigger team or whatever it might be. It really speaks to the importance of leading well, no matter where you're at and no matter how many people are in your sphere of influence.
Yeah. And I think that directly relates to the conversation we've had all the way back to that first Bible study that you did. So many things have grown out of that. And if you had not taken the care and concern that you did for the 6, 8, 10 of us, where would we be now? And so it just goes to show that God can take the little tiny steps that you use with the little tiny talents and gifts that you feel like you have and really grow them over time. And I wrote a post recently in the Facebook group about this little tiny tomato that I had and how maybe your gifts are not for 200,000 people. Maybe your gifts are for one person in one tiny place that needs that one nourishment from God. And I just kind of talked about how I was frustrated with growing my tomatoes and I couldn't get any red ones. They were all green, and how I just kept at it. And then I finally got one red one and I ate it and it was good. And it wasn't something that I could cut up and share with a bunch of people, but it was perfect for me at that perfect time. And so our gifts are very much like that. And I don't know.
Yeah, I loved that post. It was so good. And again, if you come into the group, we'll link it up so you can read it because it's just so good. But what I would love to do, because you just shared about what you're doing, I think we should each of us give a little update on what we're doing right now in our businesses or how people can connect with us, because we don't always talk about that.
No, we don't.
So tell me,
I love that.
What is your business now and where can people find you if they want to connect with you and kind of become part of your amazing community?
Oh, thank you. Okay. So if you listen to episode number 1, this is going to be very different than what I said then. So 2 years ago, when I started online business, I was just doing bookkeeping. And I say just, that's important.
Yeah, you were doing it.
People want their numbers correct and right and stuff like that. But my business has turned into something so totally different that I never thought that it would. So I now have changed the name of my business. It's called now Prosper Collective. And I am on Facebook, but I'm mostly on Instagram. So you can find me at prosper.collective. And I am basically an operational and financial strategist for online business. So I help 6- and 7-figure business owners with their operational and financial strategies. So I do what you would consider CFO work and COO work within businesses. So I really try to help people with their mission, vision, values, their strategic objectives, really sort of figuring out what to work on when, and what's going to be most impactful to hit their vision in their business. And I really like to get the numbers right and really help people make data-driven decisions in their businesses based on the numbers that are in their books. So I really become sort of a strategic thought partner with business owners. And on my Instagram page, I try to give tips and helpful hints and just kind of talk about financial responsibility, because that is something that the online space is lacking. And
Yes.
that is my soapbox, which I will not get on right now. But that is one of the things that I like to talk about. So that's what I'm doing now.
Awesome. Very good.
What about you?
Yeah. So it occurred to me when I posted a post in the Facebook group and I said, hey, do you guys know that I started a second podcast? And I linked up to the Christian Women Business Podcast. And one of our regular listeners, who I think you're going to read a review from in a minute, didn't realize that I had this second podcast. And I was like, I feel like I've talked about it so much, but I haven't really, I guess, or people just are busy and they don't hear everything I say, weirdly. So kind of like my husband, he doesn't hear everything I say either. So
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm hanging on every word.
Yes. So I have, in 2020, God has brought things together for me, and I'm starting to bring everything under one umbrella. So what I say now is I help Christian women lead with confidence, shine online, and amplify their message. Okay. So there's kind of 3 segments of what I do. One is this podcast, all about leadership for Christian women. And then I have the Confident Leader Catalyst program and the Confident Leader Club. So some programs or ways that you can be a part of the community and grow and learn more by paying for those things. So those are my programs. And then, and I have the Confident Conversations mini course. So those are all under that umbrella. And then the Shine Online is the Christian Women Business Podcast. So that's all for people who want to grow an audience or a business online. And I'm doing shorter solo episodes over there. And then I actually am running a group program for that right now too, which is so much fun.
Yay.
So just really digging into helping women who are really wanting to grow their business online. And then the Amplify Your Message is for people who want help specifically with podcasting. So again, for Christian women who want to launch a podcast or who already have a podcast and are struggling with either how to grow it or how to streamline what they're doing and save time and not feel like they're going crazy with all the things, then that is where I'm doing some consulting and have some courses and things in the works for that. So that's my update.
It's so cool how we've both transitioned our businesses into something.
Right.
It feels totally different, but it's not.
We're still the same people. We're just
still the same
doing
people.
different things.
Yeah.
And I will say too, you mentioned where people can find you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I have, if you go to estherlittlefield.com and you scroll down, you'll see those 3 things right on my homepage where you can connect with me about those 3 different things. So
yeah. Yay. Hey. It was fun. I'm glad you said for us to do that. Okay. So to finish up today, I would love to read a review. We haven't done this in a while, I feel like.
I know, we haven't.
But this one was pretty recent, and I think that it needs to be heard because it's so good. So this comes from Lori Aker, and it's titled Best Ever, episode number 102. And she says, just finished episode 102 on how to avoid burnout and experience rest. This was probably the most comprehensive, balanced, transformational, relatable pieces I've ever heard on Sabbath rest. Wow. Okay, sorry that she didn't write that. I said, wow. I will be sharing. Esther does an amazing job interviewing and lining up knowledgeable and caring guests who speak directly into the needs of Christian women. I'm grateful. Thank you so much, Lori. And I think that I picked that one because Esther needs to hear this. And she just needs to remember how amazing she is. And so I picked this review because I wanted her to hear that. And, we are just so grateful when you guys leave a rating or review for the podcast. And so we'd love to hear from you. And so if you haven't done that, we would love to invite you to do that. We really love hearing how the podcast has impacted your life, how it's helped you grow in your leadership, and what you think of the episodes. And leaving a review is also a great way to tell us what you want more of, what you want less of, and what's missing from our content. So head over to the ratings or reviews in whatever app you listen to and let us know what you think.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So now really, truly to wrap things up.
Okay. This is the end.
This is
really,
the end.
truly the end.
We thank you for sticking with us. We have a few diehards that stick with us right to the end. So
right to the end.
we always try to wrap up with a fun question. So even though we did some kind of fun questions here in our conversation, we're going to wrap up with a fun question. And we thought it would be fun. I just said fun a lot.
It's really fun around here.
It is. So we thought it would be good for each of us to share what podcasts we listen to, because you guys are listening to this podcast and we thank you. But what other podcasts do we listen to personally? And for both of us, the list may be a little bit long, so we cannot share all of them.
No, we cannot.
No, I'm putting my foot down on that one. Okay. We cannot share the full list, but we'll share a few of some of our favorites that we listen to. Okay, so Holly, tell us. Okay.
So I'm going to give you a couple categories.
Oh boy.
But I'm going to say them fast. Okay. So, okay. And we'll link all of these in the show notes.
Yes.
So if you're driving, don't go off the road.
No.
It's okay. For business podcasts, I listen to The Ops Authority with Natalie Gingrich, and she has been on our podcast as a guest, and she's a friend. We love her. All things operational, and she literally is the authority on them. Okay, so that's the first business one. The second business one that I've listened to every single episode of is the Christian Woman Business Podcast by my great friend Esther. Seriously, it's so relatable and so good. And then the third one that is business is called Grit by Jessica Stansberry, and I really enjoy her. Okay, so that is business.
Okay.
Sort of like Christian sort of arena. I have always listened to Living Proof with Beth Moore, and I just can't get enough of her. And if I want some really hardcore, meaty stuff, I listen to Living Proof.
I don't know how I haven't listened to that. I have not listened to that episode, that podcast. What is wrong with me?
Oh, well, so Living Proof Live.
Yeah.
That she does. Well,
right.
I mean, podcast. She does it as a podcast. So it's super duper good. Okay. And then one that I've kind of gone in and out of a little bit is Made for This with Jenny Allen.
Yep.
Okay. So that's that. And then one that I'll give you that's just fun. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the most part, you can listen to it with your family. There are a few that you might not want to, but you can figure that out on your own. It's called The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe. And if you know Mike Rowe, he did the Dirty Jobs show, and he's done a couple other shows, but he has a I wish I could remember the guy's name, but anyway, he tells these little 5 to 10 minute stories about their kind of biographies in a way, but he doesn't tell you the name of the person until the end. And so it's this person went on to do this, and this was this interesting story, and the person I'm talking about is John Lennon or Oprah Winfrey or whatever. And so your mind is blown, and you're oh my gosh, I didn't know that about that person. And anyway, it's just a really cool. My son loves listening to that one. And as I said, there are a few that you might want to pre-listen to, but you can kind of tell by the episode titles what they're going to be about. So
okay. Awesome. Okay.
What are yours?
All right. Well, it's very hard to choose.
I know. I left out some really good ones that I consistently listen to.
Okay. So I'm going to mention The Legacy Entrepreneur. From my friend Lindsay Johnson.
Yes, Lindsay.
So she's amazing, and she started her podcast fairly recently. I've been on her show. So if you are a Christian business owner, this is really, really good. It's all about business owners who want to have a legacy with their business and live a legacy life. So she's very much about life and not just business. Another one is the Go-To Gal podcast with Jacqueline Malone. Not faith-based, not Christian, but I love her perspective on business, and she's just fun to listen to. And then another one that you may not have heard is called My Biz Bestie. And again, not a faith-based podcast, but a fun one about about the entrepreneurial life, but having a friend, like a biz bestie that you can do that with. And they have some different conversations. They talk a lot about personalities and about just the ups and downs of the online space and business space. And then I will mention The Next Right Thing, which probably a lot of you have heard, but again, that's Emily P. Freeman. And it's just I don't necessarily listen to it every single week, but whenever I'm kind of in a space where I'm feeling overwhelmed or feeling just my brain is exploding, it's such a good, chill out and calm down episode. And I listened to it on the way to strawberry picking this morning, and I had my daughter in the car. And after it got done, she was like, "That was a really nice podcast, Mom."
Oh,
I really liked that. Like she enjoyed it too. So
she's
that one. And then Friending from Noelle Rhodes. I don't know if you guys have heard that.
I never listened to her podcast.
Oh, well, you should. So she talks about,
obviously know who she is, but
yeah, she's in our Facebook group and she's been on the podcast, and she's all about female friendships. So again, not necessarily always about faith. She doesn't necessarily keep it just faith-based, but she is a Christian, but she talks about all the issues that we face as females in friendships. And lastly, it's really hard to choose, but I'm going to just also throw out another friend of mine who has a podcast, which is Grace in Real Life with Jill E. McCormick. And that is really an encouraging podcast, especially if you are a mom. I would say especially for moms, but not just for moms, but just talks a lot about just having grace for yourself and for your family and for life and how to get through things. And it's very biblically based. So those are some of the ones I listen to.
You picked some really good ones. And I'm so I want to, Okay. You're
going to add another one?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
So Lindsay, I want to tell you that I just subscribed to The Legacy Entrepreneur.
Oh, good.
And Noelle, I just subscribed to Friending. And Jill, I have to apologize that I had never subscribed to yours. So if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but I'm subscribed now. And I have listened to a couple of your episodes, but why I wasn't subscribed, I don't know. Yeah. But you picked some really, really good ones. Really good
yes.
ones.
So we'll put the links to those ones that we mentioned in the show notes so you guys can go check them out. So awesome. All right. Well, I think we're done.
We are done. Thanks for listening to the end.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to 2 years of podcasts.
Yes. And coming up in the next few months, we're going to have we're going to get back into our normal format of some just really good interviews and then some other conversations with Holly and I. So buckle up. It's going to be good. Yeah. We hope you're subscribed. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed to this, please do that.
Do it now. So. Hit the button. If you're driving, don't hit the button. But remember, when you stop driving, pull over right now and hit subscribe.
All right. Well, thank you, friends, for being with us today. We are so glad that you joined us, and we look forward to the next year with you. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.